Muy buenas noches. ¿Me escuchan? Excellent. I'll switch now into English. Welcome everybody to EEPNA. How many of you are students here at EEPNA? If you could raise your hands. Well, it's always great to see. Many of you maybe know that EEPNA is a well-known institution for teaching English, and we also have excellent cultural activities, and we have a wonderful library. But a lot of people don't know that at EEPNA we have an Education USA Center where students can come not just from EEPNA but from any part of the country to receive support in learning how to apply to US universities. And tonight we have a very special guest from the United States who's going to help us understand more about scholarships. But I did want to mention the Education USA Center that brought our guest here. So I wanted to begin talking to you all about Education USA. Education USA is a network of advising centers. We are in 175 countries. And the purpose of an advisor is to help students like yourselves understand how to apply to American universities, how to complete all of your applications, to identify the deadlines, to understand the exams. Essentially, we are your one-stop place for orientation about this process. When you work with an Education USA Center, you will quickly understand that we have divided this process that is maybe 14, maybe 16 months long into 5 steps. And the 5 steps are to investigate your universities, to finance your education, scholarships, to take all of your exams and complete all of your applications, to apply for your student visas so that you can go to the United States, and finally to prepare culturally for that trip, going to a new country and going to a new campus. So all of these themes you will learn in an Education USA Center. You can see here a few of the universities that have visited us and where we have students. Something that we really love to share in the Education USA Center is that we work with over 4,000 universities. We do not work with just 1 or 2. So we like to tell our students that there is a university in the US for every profile here. We have students in the room tonight who are interested in undergraduate programs, graduate programs, and Education USA centers have information for all of you. So I did want to highlight this because a lot of the students that come to the office sometimes think that maybe we only work with a group of small universities, but we don't. We work with universities in all of the 50 states of America. So I know many of you have questions about how to apply, and I think that this type of event is going to help you resolve a lot of those questions. But specifically, the number one question that we have is, how can I finance a US education? I want to study there. I know it's costly. How can I find financial aid? Where are the scholarships? And that's why today I'm very excited that Morgan is with us to help explain to you from a US university perspective how this is possible. After Morgan speaks, we also have a very special student with us who has worked with the Education USA Center, who has been successful in his applications and has earned a lot of financial aid, and he will talk about his experience so that he can share that knowledge with you. And then to conclude the event, I will come back to answer any questions you have about graduate applications. Finally, before I step down, I wanted to mention that I would really appreciate if you have your phones with you, for you to connect with us on the following social media. We are on Facebook as Education USA Peru. We are also on Instagram, and currently we're live on YouTube since Facebook has been down for the past day. So you can find a lot of useful videos, articles, and testimonials on all of these platforms. We're very happy to have you tonight. And the final thing I'd like to mention is, if you have your cell phones, if you could please put them on silent, we would greatly appreciate that. So without further ado, I'd like to present Morgan so that she can talk to us about her institution and financial aid opportunities. If you could help me receive Morgan with a warm round of applause.
Thank you for the warm welcome this evening, and thank you to Education USA for having me here. It's always a pleasure to collaborate with Education USA. In fact, in every country that I visit, and I've been to about 40 countries on behalf of Lehigh to recruit prospective students, I make a stop at Education USA to get up to date on what's going on in the country and also to meet wonderful students and families like yourself. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for your time. So I've been working in admissions now for about 6 years and over 10 years in international education. I've been managing international financial aid and scholarships at Lehigh University since I started in this role. And so I've worked with a lot of students throughout the process, and I understand that it's a very difficult process to navigate and also a very important process to obtaining the opportunity to study in the US, right? It's oftentimes the determining factor of where you might study in the US, because if you can't afford it and you're not awarded the financial aid and scholarships that you need, then you would not be able to attend, right? So just to start off with you, I actually want to give you a very brief overview of Lehigh University. Is anybody familiar with Lehigh before today? Then you're going to learn a lot tonight. But I'll just spend a few minutes on this. So Lehigh is actually a top tier private research university, and we're located in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So Bethlehem is actually about an hour drive to Philadelphia and an hour and a half drive to New York City. So two cities that you're probably a little bit more familiar with than Bethlehem, right? But we are located in the beautiful Lehigh Valley. Academically, we have 4 colleges that we offer. So you have 20 programs in our College of Engineering, about 10 programs in our College of Business, and then you have 50 programs in a College of Arts and Sciences, and then a College of Education that's specific to graduate students, and a new College of Health that will be opened in the next couple of years. So we really emphasize an interdisciplinary approach to education. So students don't need to come in with a major. They come to Lehigh and we work with them to figure out what is the right fit for them and how they can combine various interests. So at Lehigh, you'll find students who might be majoring in marketing or accounting, but also have a minor in engineering or music. So you can combine programs across all of our colleges to sort of customize your study there. Also, we provide a lot of practical experiences. So we're all about you applying what you're learning through internships, co-ops, which are long-term sort of internships, but are paid work experiences that happen for 8 months at Lehigh, and also global experiences too. So we have a fully funded international internship that's offered to students in the summertime. And then we also have a partnership with the United Nations that's worth noting. Every Thursday, our students have the opportunity to attend the weekly briefings at the UN, and many of our students actually represent NGOs all over the world at the United Nations. And that is because Lehigh was the 6th institution in the world to be recognized as a non-governmental organization. Something else I would like to note that I think really distinguishes Lehigh is that we also have a West Coast presence in California. So in San Francisco, where I'm actually based for Lehigh, we're providing opportunities for our current students to come out there, do internships, work with startups, be mentored by professionals in various fields, and also experience the opportunities that are available to students throughout the West Coast. So at Lehigh, your home will be in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, but you will not be limited by the opportunities and experiences there, because you would be able to also take advantage of what we're doing in San Francisco through our partnership with the Lehigh at NASDAQ Center. Okay, so I encourage you to learn a little bit more about Lehigh. We're here to talk about financial aid and scholarships, which Lehigh is very fortunate to be able to offer to students all over the world. And I'm going to sort of, go through a lot of information. And so I hope it's not too much information, and I'll make sure to let you know where you can go to get more after today or find details about things. Okay, so without further delay, these are some of the questions that I want to answer tonight. We want to know how to apply for financial aid and scholarships in the US, right? And I'll be talking specifically about undergraduate programs, okay? And then at the end, we'll actually share information about graduate programs as well and how you can apply for financial aid and scholarships there. The second thing is, what's the difference between things like grants, scholarships, loans, and work study? So these are all different types of financial aid that we're going to go over tonight. And these are the ways that you're going to be able to help fund your education in the United States. And then the third thing, and I think one of the most important thing, is how to communicate and how to do outreach to what would be your financial aid advisor in the United States. So every student has one. We all have a financial aid office, and they're there to help you through the process. And so I want to make sure that you're prepared for that when the time comes. And that could be at any point in the process as well. So some important terms that you're going to hear me use throughout the presentation, and also that you'll see on various websites that are out there. When you go to the financial aid website, there's some terminology that we will use, or even if you attend another university's presentation, they may use some of this confusing terminology. So the first one has to do with the way in which we review applications. So at Lehigh, we accept the common application, your transcript, SAT or ACT scores, your recommendation letters, but we also will require your financial information, because we can only make a decision with that information at hand, because we have a very limited international financial aid and scholarship budget that we're working with, right? So we need to know what a student and their family is able to contribute financially, so that we can ensure if that student is admitted, we will either be able to fund them or they will be able to fund themselves. And so that's called a need-aware way of reading applications. Okay, so we are aware of what a family can contribute, and that way we can make sure we can meet that need if a student is admitted to Lehigh. The other way that universities might look at an application is need blind. So that means they're not looking at any of that financial information when you apply to that institution. There's very few institutions out there that are able to be need blind, because many schools, unfortunately, don't have unlimited resources for financial aid for international students, right? So regardless, though, if a school is need aware, need blind, either way, you can still receive funding from them. But they may use those terms to explain how they look at an application when financial aid comes into play. The next thing I'll mention is need-based and merit-based funding. So when we talk about scholarships and financial aid, I really think of them as two separate things, okay? Financial aid is the need-based funding that students apply for. And we'll talk about how you do that in a minute. The merit-based funding may not even have an application. This is something that you're looked at oftentimes when you apply to schools, or there may be separate applications, but that's going to be based on your personal attributes, things that you excel in, your grades, your test scores, those sorts of things. So merit-based is going to be a little bit different than the financial aid that's based on what your family can afford. Although many students who qualify for financial aid are also students who are merit-worthy, merit scholarship-worthy students as well. Okay, so I want you to remember that they can be two separate things in the way that you look at this when you're researching schools. The third thing, expected family contribution. We often use EFC, so I'm going to say EFC throughout the presentation, and this is actually the financial assistance that your family is able to provide. And that's going to include as well potentially outside scholarships that you receive that you apply for, as well as potential government funding or funds that you've earned through a part-time job that you have. So these are potential funds that can be used towards your college education. And we'll talk about how that comes into play. And then the last thing is the types of financial aid, which I mentioned earlier, and we're going to go over each one of those in a moment. So the financial aid process, there's some typical things that go into that. So this is applying for that need-based financial aid, right? I'm going to go over the different forms that are typically required of students, but please keep in mind that every university and college is not the same. So it's really important that you look at the specific requirements, but these are going to be some of those requirements that you'll often see across the board. The first one being the Certificate of Finances form. So this is actually a picture of what part of Lehigh's Certificate of Finances form looks like. And it has 4 years, the 4 years that you will be pursuing your undergraduate degree. And you're to indicate how much your family can afford towards college, or how much you are receiving from your government or from individual sponsors as well. And then you would include the total at the bottom for each year. And so this is you agreeing that this is the amount of money that you can pay towards the tuition and room and board at that institution. So this form may be modified for any university that you're applying to. The College Board also has a similar form that some schools will utilize as well, but for the most part, they're trying to collect information that will indicate how much your family can afford for each year. And it's important that you fill out the form for all 4 years, since that's usually how long you're going to be at the institution, okay? The second thing, which oftentimes goes alongside the Certificate of Finances form, is a bank statement or a letter from your parents' employer, if your parents are the ones who are funding your education. And this is to show that you have those funds in the bank, if it's a bank statement, to pay for at least the first year of your study in the United States. And so that should coincide with the number that you indicate in the first year of the Certificate of Finances, okay? And so not all schools will require that right away. Some will take that later on. I think we'll save the questions for the end. Yeah, so keep note of your questions, and we'll do that at the very end. So the third thing is the CSS Profile. How many of you have heard of the CSS Profile? Okay, so this is another one of those forms that you will commonly see, especially used by a lot of private institutions in the United States. Both US citizens and non-US citizens fill this form out if they're applying for financial aid. So this form, this is where you can access it, but if you just do a Google search of CSS Profile, you'll be able to find it, but that is the website for it. And this form is used for almost 400 colleges in order for you to apply for need-based aid. So it is one form. In some cases, there may be some slight differences depending on the school that you're applying to. And this is a form that a lot of times causes some confusion for families, because it's not typical information that you're asked for, and it might be information that you're usually, you keep private, right? And now you're asked to share that. But it's confidential when you submit it to the institution, but it's really important that you fill out that form completely, okay? And then if you have questions as you're going through it, that's what our financial aid office is about. That's what they're there for, and also EducationUSA as well. And so I'll talk about how you can do outreach as you have questions when you're filling out this particular form, which I would say is probably the most important one in the process for a lot of private schools. So just some quick tips and things to know about the CSS Profile. It's available October 1st for students to access. And typically you want to make sure that you have that in well before the school's deadline. So for Lehigh and for a lot of our peer institutions, we require you to have all of your financial documents. So that includes the Certificate of Finances form, as well as the CSS Profile by the deadline of your common application. Okay, so sometimes you'll go on the website and you'll see all these deadlines, but they actually apply to US citizens usually, and it can be very confusing. So you want to make sure that you're looking at the information that's specific to non-US citizens, because the deadlines tend to be different. And that's because we need to have all of your financial aid information at the time of your application to make a decision and ensure that we're able to meet your financial need. Okay, so for instance, at Lehigh, we have early decision, regular decision. So early decision applications are due November 15th. So that's also when you would need to submit the CSS profile and your certificate of finances. I suggest submitting it by November 1st. So that way you can give it plenty of time to be in the system and for you to know that the institution has received that. So you can review the CSS profile before October 1st to make sure that you're collecting the necessary documents. So there's no need to wait until October 1st to start this process. It's always better to prepare ahead of time and know exactly what you're going to need when the time comes. So you also, there is a fee associated with the CSS profile, okay? Some schools will provide a fee waiver for you. It's always worth asking. Sometimes you will see it on their website. We provide CSS profile fee waivers. Sometimes you won't. So, but you're always going to have to reach out. At Lehigh, we require a brief explanation of why you need the fee waiver. So explaining, your family situation and why you maybe can't afford that fee. And then we provide a code that you enter into the form and it will waive the fee that's associated with the CSS profile. Okay, so make sure you ask the individual schools that you're applying to about that. So the last thing, the last sort of piece of the financial aid process that I want to talk about today that can be very typical are institutional aid applications. Like I said, every school is different. So some may have their own application for you to fill out altogether, okay? So that's where you really need to pay attention to those requirements for each individual one. So something that you need to be thinking about as you're researching schools and determining where you're going to apply and where you're also going to apply for financial aid and scholarships is how much does it cost to go there, right? Schools are not cheap in the US. The price varies widely across the board, but you also should not be scared by the high price tags of some schools, right? So billable costs are going to be your tuition fees, on-campus room and board. These are what's going to show up on your college bill, right? So I'm going to give you an example. At Lehigh, it's about $70,000 US per year to attend our institution. That includes tuition, room and board, but it does not include indirect costs. So those are going to be things like your personal travel expenses, round trip airfare back and forth, right? Your computer, your phone bill, those are things that you need to think about as you're looking at cost of attendance for schools. That's not always going to be in the cost that they report on their website. But usually the cost of attendance will include, if you're living on campus room and board, tuition and fees. And at Lehigh, like I said, it's $70,000. But what's important to keep in mind when you see those high price tags, your second question should be, do they offer financial aid and scholarships to international students, right? Because that could make it something that's very doable for your family. And like I mentioned earlier, we're fortunate that we are able, for those students who are admitted to Lehigh, to meet their need 100%, okay? So keep this in mind, the cost of attendance, right? So that number, And then you have your expected family contribution. So we mentioned that earlier, right? So you want to try and determine what your family can safely contribute each year. And really thinking about, these are some of the things that we think about in our financial aid office when we have to make that determination as well. So we don't always just take your word for it. We do analyze some different factors, and these come through in the Css profile that you fill out. So we'll be looking at assets, so things that the family owns, savings, the amount that the student might be able to contribute, the size of your family. If you have any other students that are in college at the time that the student who is applying will be in college, that could also affect the amount that we would expect a family to contribute. Also, certain circumstances. These are things you should always let the financial aid office know about because it could affect the amount that we expect you to pay. And that could be maybe you care for other family members. So you're covering expenses of other family members. We won't know that unless you tell us. So it's really important that we know the whole picture. This could also have to do with the time when parents retire. So it may depend how old the parent is and how close to retirement they are and how long they will be earning money. So it's a very holistic and tedious process. And we ask you to also, figure out for your family how much you can contribute as well. And we ask you that in the form. So the way that we determine how much you need, right? How much financial aid do you need to be able to attend Lehigh or whatever institution it is? We take that cost of attendance. So let's use $70,000. We take, this is just an example. Let's say $20,000 is the amount that a family can contribute on an annual basis. It may not be $20,000, it could be $5,000, it could be $0, it could be $60,000, right? It's whatever your family can contribute. And then the remainder will be your financial need. So that's how much either we need to award you in financial aid or scholarships so that we can admit you to the institution. So that's kind of how we see it. And I think this is important for you to think about when you're looking at each school, because each cost of attendance will be different, right? Because if that cost, that financial need part, is not something that that college or university is able to meet, then you might want to move on. It might not be the university for you. It's not a fit. Part of finding the right fit university and college has a lot to do with financial fit, right? So if that $50,000 that's remaining isn't, the university is saying, we only give up to $20,000 in financial aid, or our merit scholarships only go up to $12,000. That's going to leave you with about $40,000 that still needs to be covered, right? So in that case, you may want to look at schools that are able to cover at least that amount of your need, right? There are other outside scholarships, which we'll talk about, that you can look to. But I think it's really important to not rely on one particular source for funding, right? Best case scenario, the university you're applying to is a school that has the financial aid to be able to award you what is left, which in this case for this student would be $50,000, right? So we have some students that apply to Lehigh who have zero expected family contribution. In that case, if we admit them, we're giving them $70,000 per year to attend Lehigh, okay? And then there's also students who need less. What you should know, though, is that because we're need aware and we have this limited budget, it is a bit more competitive for those students that need significant financial aid because they're competing for a limited amount of funding, right? So that's what I mean when I say need aware, is we have to make sure we stay within that budget. And so that means students have to be very competitive applicants to compete for that financial aid. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So the types of financial aid, when I talk about, Lehigh or other schools meeting your need financially, that can come in a number of different ways. It's not always, here's the funding. You're going to see it come in a number of ways. So first, we're going to talk about grants. So grants are probably going to be one of the more common types of financial aid that come out of private schools and also some public schools as well. And this is basically going to be free money. You don't need to pay it back to the institution. There may be some requirements in terms of a GPA that you need to maintain in order to keep your funding. It's going to be based oftentimes on the amount of need that you have, and sometimes also your merit as well. Typically, you do have to reapply for these need-based grants every year. Okay, so this is what most of financial aid is grants that you reapply for. And the reason you reapply is because your family situation may have changed, right? Maybe it's changed for the, in the way that you could contribute more, or it could have changed in a way that you can't contribute as much. And so we would then need to adjust your financial aid package on a year-by-year basis, okay? And this is another question to ask schools, because some actually, they won't adjust your package if something happens. So you need to know, is this something that I can count on? If something changes, can I receive more financial aid later, or is this amount as good as it gets, basically? And oftentimes grants can also apply to more than just tuition and room and board. So whereas scholarships, which we're going to talk about next, typically go towards your tuition at the university, right? So for example, at Lehigh, we offer merit scholarships that are based on your academics and your the things that you're involved in, your leadership, and the potential that you have to contribute to our institution. And our merit scholarships will range from $12,000 to about $25,000, okay? But it's never a guarantee. It's not, you get this GPA and this test score and you automatically get this merit scholarship, okay? So it's a very holistic process. However, at some schools, they have merit scholarships that do have requirements set in place. So you may see schools that say, with a 3.0 GPA, you will automatically receive this merit scholarship. So that's really helpful to know when you're in the position of needing that funding to be able to attend the institution, and knowing right away that you would qualify for that if you get into the institution. Okay, so schools offer it in different ways. Sometimes the scholarships can also be based on athletic talent, academic, of course, leadership, but also things like theater, music, and community service are very common things that we look to. And you may have specific scholarships that you'll either find on the admissions webpage, or you might find them on the music department's webpage or the theater department's webpage. So it's a little bit confusing because we send you in a lot of different directions. But if you follow it, you can find some great opportunities to apply for, and some that you won't even need to apply for in order to receive that scholarship. So at Lehigh, just by applying to Lehigh, you're automatically considered. So there's no separate merit scholarship application, right? Like there is for financial aid, right? So they're two separate things. So typically the merit scholarships are renewable on an annual basis. Because they're often based on academic performance, we are going to expect you to maintain a certain GPA typically to keep that merit scholarship, okay? So just some quick notes about scholarships, because there are so many out there all over the internet. It's definitely overwhelming, and you want to just be aware that there are scams out there. So when you find opportunities, if you're not sure about it, or if they ever ask you for any money to apply for the scholarship, I would say it's probably not something to do. And I think you can always probably run it by EducationUSA staff, or even a financial aid office at a university, and ask them if they're familiar with the particular scholarship. But definitely don't pay money to apply for scholarships. There's a lot of great resources out there. The College Board is one of them. If you go to the College Board and Big Futures, there's a lot of resources for you for the entire application process, and then also specific for international students applying for financial aid. And I also direct students to the EducationUSA websites and advisors to get information about scholarships specific to their country as well that could help them to study in the United States. So one of the third types of financial aid that students might receive is work study. So this is usually based on financial need, and it's usually a limited amount of funding. U.S. citizens can receive federal funding in the form of work study, where they're working in an office on campus and getting paid sort of like an hourly wage for a set number of hours. Now, for non-U.S. citizens, for international students, it's institutional funding. So it's a different kind of funding that some schools will offer and some will not, but you might see it on their website. So for instance, at Lehigh, we may package a student with $2,000 of work study to meet their financial need. Okay, so they might be working a few hours a week in one of our offices on campus, and then the money that they earn from that can be used towards anything, really. So you would get a check, you can use it for to order pizza, or if you need some winter boots or something. So it's extra spending money that you don't need to put towards your tuition and room and board unless you want to. The fourth one that I mentioned is loans. So this is one to be careful with because it is something that you have to pay back eventually. At Lehigh, we do package students with loans, but no more than $4,000 per year for international students. Okay, so we don't want students to graduate with too much debt, and we want it to be manageable because who knows where you're going to be going to work afterwards, and you will have to pay that back. So you want to make sure it's manageable. The way that loans work at Lehigh is it does not accrue any interest during your time at the university. Okay, so usually it's about 3 months after you graduate, at least at Lehigh, that you start to accrue interest at about 7% on those loans. Again, every school is going to be different, and there's different kind of loans out there through banks, through the institution. So you want to make sure that you go over that information. But I think if a school is offering you loans that is equivalent to maybe more than what a car would cost, and this is over your 4 years, that's probably too much, right? Or it might be okay for you, but if it's about as much as a house would cost, that's way too much in loans to be taking out. But that's really up to you and your family. And again, is going to be something that varies from university to university. So when we were looking at, let's see, this equation here of how we come up with financial need. So that financial need, the $50,000 that this student would have remaining, that would be met at a school like Lehigh. It could be met in two ways. We would give you the $2,000 in work study, $4,000 in a loan, and then the rest would be $44,000 in financial aid to meet your need. That would not have to be paid back. You wouldn't have to work for it through work study. So that would be a typical package for somebody in this situation. The other case may be a student may receive a merit scholarship alongside financial aid to meet their need. So like I said before, we have merit scholarships up to $25,000. So you would get a merit scholarship for $25,000 and then $25,000 in financial aid. So none of that, you wouldn't need to pay back any of that funding. So it's important to understand how a university packages financial aid, right? How much do you need to pay back? What is it that you need to maybe take on a part-time job to pay back at the institution and things of that nature. So I mentioned earlier, I do want to talk a little bit about how you can utilize our financial aid offices. because this could be as you're doing research into different institutions and their own specific financial aid processes, or it could be once you've already received a financial aid package and you're not quite sure what it means for you and how to make sense of it. So first and foremost, as you're doing research into schools to make sure that they can meet your need, you want to ask a few questions as you're going through. So some of the ones that I think are important to note and might be obvious based on what I've already talked about, but definitely the deadlines for non-US citizens, right? Because they're different than US citizens for a lot of schools. Is financial aid awarded if a school has early decision and regular decision? Is it awarded in early decision if you decide that that's where you want to apply and that's where you want to spend 4 years? So early decision is a binding agreement. If you apply early decision, and you're admitted, that's where you will go for the next 4 years. So you really want to know that that school you're applying to early decision will be able to meet your need financially. So sometimes that's a good question to ask an institution. The preferred way of sending documents. We receive documents in our offices in so many different ways because I think oftentimes students miss that on the website. So you want to make sure you're sending them appropriately, whether that's email or if it's in the mail, or maybe it's an electronic document sending system, which is what we use at Lehigh. But it's always good to make sure you follow up on those once you submit them. And you should have an online portal with the financial aid office or with the admissions office where you can check to see that the forms you've submitted have been uploaded. And I would give them about a week or two for that to appear online or for you to get an email that lets you know we've received your documents. And then if you don't, then it's a good time to reach out and see what went wrong in the process and resubmit your documents again. So that can happen because we have so many applicants sending things in, okay? So that's why if you start early, you give yourself plenty of time to be able to do that in case there's a problem. Is there anything additional the school requires that you're applying to? I mentioned schools are very different in what they require. They may have their own application for financial aid or scholarships. Some may require bank statements, some may not. So it really just depends. So definitely maybe keep like an Excel sheet where you track what each school is requiring for financial aid, as well as in their admissions process too, which can vary from school to school. Does this school offer financial aid or scholarships that meet full need, right? So we talked about that earlier. Will that school meet the need that you've based on the cost of attendance and the expected family contribution? What's left at the end is that school have the financial resources to meet your need with those merit scholarships. And so if you're not seeing that information on the website, you definitely want to ask a financial aid advisor about that, okay? Is there a separate application for scholarships? We've talked a little bit about that. And are funds guaranteed for all 4 years? And is there an academic progress policy? So we mentioned, most merit scholarships will have an academic progress policy in place because they were based on your merit to receive them. And not everything's guaranteed all 4 years. So sometimes that is a question that you might need to ask if you don't see it indicated on the website. This is actually just a snapshot, a couple snapshots from our financial aid website. You can usually find out who your financial aid advisor is just by looking on the website. So I would recommend doing that early on, and then as questions come up, you can be in touch with that person. Most universities will have a similar website like this with a designated financial aid advisor. So when you're reaching out with questions to that person, you want to make sure that you thoroughly reviewed the website, right? So you want to make sure that you're not asking questions that are very clearly stated on the website, okay? And you want to also make sure that you're telling that person that you are not a US citizen, because it's very different in the process and the way that they will answer your questions, okay? So you would indicate that you're an international student or a non-US citizen. You would also want to make sure that you include your full name as it appears on your passport and as it appears on your applications that you've sent in. So some students will use nicknames, or they won't mention other parts of their name, and we can't match the documents up. So that's a very common problem in a lot of admissions and financial aid offices that can easily be fixed by making sure that your name is consistent across all of the documents you send and in the emails that you send too, so they can reference any documents that you have questions about that you might have submitted. Okay. So we've covered a lot of information, and there's a lot more out there as well. I hope I've touched on what I consider to be the things that are most common across various schools in the US that you'll see as you're going through the financial aid process. And for us at Lehigh, we definitely look for a certain kind of student to receive financial aid as well as merit scholarships at Lehigh. So it really is the student who is showcasing how they will contribute to our campus community in and outside of the classroom, which oftentimes comes through in your extracurricular activities, your personal essay, a supplemental essay, which we ask you why Lehigh, and you tell us why you want to attend and how you're going to add to our community. But also through your recommendation letters that sometimes come from EducationUSA advisors or your teachers or your counselors. But also we're looking for students who show initiative in the process, so that are reaching out to their financial aid advisor, to their admissions counselor. The more information I have about a student, the better I get to know them and can determine if they're a fit for Lehigh. So that could even be through a Skype interview. So there's other ways that you can help the institution to get to know you, to help you stand out in the process. So it's always worth asking. But you can also reach out to other people that you see online. So you may be able to go to a department's website. So let's say you're interested in mechanical engineering. You might go to that website, you'll see a professor that interests you, and reach out to them and ask them about their program. I've gotten lots of emails from professors on campus that let me know about prospective students who have been in touch with them, who have taken that initiative to reach out and to also show their interest in Lehigh. So we want to make sure that students are genuinely interested in our institutions and being there if we admit them, especially if we're awarding financial aid, because it's typically very limited for us. Finally, submitting everything on time. The number one reason that students don't receive the financial aid and scholarships they need is usually because we're missing financial aid forms or they have not been submitted by the deadline, okay? And then also academic performance in the classroom, just having a solid academic profile that indicates to us that they're going to be someone who's successful at Lehigh. So every school may be looking for different things, and depending if it's a scholarship that's specific to an area, our merit scholarships, we look at all of these factors. And we also look at these when we're awarding financial aid because it is a competitive process at Lehigh. I'm very fortunate and proud today to mention a student who's here tonight, Alonso, who is joining Lehigh's class of 2023. He applied early decision to Lehigh and was also awarded the financial aid that he needed to be able to attend Lehigh. And he's also been working closely with EducationUSA. And can we give him a round of applause and just congratulate him on that accomplishment? And so I'm actually going to hand the mic over to Alonso to share a little bit about his experience in the process. And I think he'll be a great resource for all of you, since he just went through that process and he's just experienced some of the challenges and what we all just talked about, which I know can be a lot to take in. So I'm going to let you take it over, Alonso.
Thank you, Morgan. Good afternoon to all those present here and also the ones who are watching us on YouTube Live. Well, my name is Alonso Cornejo. I am 18 years old and I'm currently a freshman at Lehigh University in the interdisciplinary program of computer science and business. Well, I actually study in Colegio Santa María Marianistas, which is a school that has the Peruvian education system. and where I could make a lot of things, especially extracurricular activities, which is something I really enjoy. Particularly, I follow my passions. For example, in helping the others, the most needed, I was part in a group called Working for a Smile, in which we work in Otusco making hydraulic projects to give irrigation work to make irrigation canals for the most needed people in Otusco, and currently we're doing a pot of water project. Moreover, in the case of business, I participate in Junior Achievement en la compañía 2.0. Is there anyone here in their junior year? Cuarto de media. Okay. So many people from cuarto de media or junior year are usually familiar with this program, which is amazing. I recommend it. And also, you got I participated in MUN because I really like to learn more about the economics of the word, the problems of the word, and also to develop some skills like public speaking and debating. Well, when I did the things I didn't knew about if it was possible to study in the US, and I also obviously didn't know about the financial aid. I always thought like it was something that was impossible because it was too expensive. I knew that some guys who were paying $70,000 to just live, study in the campus and living there doesn't include our prices. But it wasn't until like October of my senior year, quinto de media, where a guy from my school who was advised by Education USA came to my school and gave a speech about his experience. And so I came here to IBNA. I was seated like you, and there was a guy like let me know that say his testimony how he applied to US colleges. And well, the first thing I found is not impossible, not impossible. Even though the people may say it's really difficult, you have to study a lot, it's better to stay in Peru. I'll say that it's not as difficult. Trust me, it's possible. And well, so I was advised by Alejandro Beltis. I'm not sure if he's watching us. He's in the US right now. And well, I tried to make all the exams in the last month, because I felt like it wasn't so difficult when they mentioned you. So I felt like I could do all the exams in just 1 month. I got accepted. Wrong. So guys, we're on March. You have time to prepare for the exams, the SAT, the TOEFL, and yeah, to have an accessory with the EducationUSA counselors. And well, and then I realized I have to take what we call here año sabático, or in the US gap year. So it was a year where I discovered a lot of things, including some passion for business and for computer science, which then like correlated with my interest in business. And when I was looking forward to look for a major that was similar to that, I found on Lehigh University that special major. A major that cover not just computer science or business, because it covers a lot, and especially it gives a lot of focus on entrepreneurship, something that I really enjoyed to do and has been part of my life. It's something like that motivates me to innovate, to not be like in the safe zone, but to believe I can do a change in pro of Peru, looking to make and help our people reach the US in this case, or maybe in the future give jobs or help the most needed, and most importantly, help people from Peru to give their best and reach sustainable development. Well, the first thing that I was amazed by of Lehigh was its campus. Like, I'm sure you can please put the first screen. So yeah, Lehigh is a beautiful campus in Bethlehem Valley. in Pennsylvania. And yeah, it's just amazing because it has the old buildings. And yeah, you can see here. And also has some new buildings or new libraries or new houses that now actually I found out that Lehigh is launching Go, which is what we call here Plan Maestro. And will be like a change in Lehigh because it's going to improve infrastructure and it's going to be also give more opportunities to students. But what motivated me about studying Lehigh was the fact that they support entrepreneurship in all of its kinds. For example, by giving a lot of support to the researchers or to personal projects. And also the international correlations and representation it has all over the world, like Morgan said about the UN partnership. And well, my advice to all of you, it's not impossible to study in the US. The high universities is really affordable and they are really friendly to help you in everything. I remember when I had to send emails and letters, they will always be to help me and they will answer really quickly, including at 12 a.m. And yeah, so it's really affordable, a beautiful campus, a high academic reputation, because most of the programs are in the top 20 in the US, and especially for business engineering. Well, the atmosphere is amazing. I have met 2 days ago people from Lehigh and teachers, including the president of the Lehigh, and they're amazing people, and I feel that I'm in the correct place. In the end, I will try to thank all the people who influenced in this process. First to mention EducationUSA, Alejandro, I know if you're watching this, thank you for all, Kelly, also you, for all that time you worked out of your hours to help me with the process. The Office of Translation, were always looking forward to help me and to Russia with the translation of the documents. To Lehigh University for giving me this unique opportunity of studying at top US colleges where I felt like it's my place, my life. And especially to my parents have helped me a lot and who are present here and support me during the whole process. And in the end, feel free to ask me any questions like when the presentation ends. And thank you for your attention.
Well, now we have space for questions. We know that sometimes there's a lot of information we're giving you, and there's still so many questions that you guys have. Feel free that if you want to ask any questions, they can be in English, they can be in Spanish. We'll translate just so that some of you feel comfortable in asking. So, who would like to begin? Preguntas about anything mentioned here. Wonderful. Please tell us your name
Okay.
and your question.
Okay. So my name is Alejandra Carrasco. Good night for all of you. And my question is about financial aid. And I was a little confused about if I have to reach out the financial aid at the beginning of my application or when I finish my application.
Wonderful question for Morgan.
Yes, thank you for your question.
Oh, thank you too.
Yeah, so I think it depends. So it's important that you first review the website, right? And I think after you do that, you'll probably be left with at least a few questions. So it's safe to say that as you're doing your research, you will probably be reaching out to the financial aid office to have those questions answered to make sure that everything is clear, right? Sometimes the website isn't as clear as we would like it to be. So definitely you can email them through the research process. If you feel like everything is clear and you have no questions and you want to move forward with the application, that's fine. There's no requirement to reach out, right?
Okay.
The other time to reach out is after you've submitted documents, and if there's anything that indicates the school has not received them, then you want to reach out as well and let them know that you sent them at a certain date. And then finally, when you receive your financial aid package and your admission to the institution, there's usually a lot of questions that come with that. And in some case, the question is, how can I appeal to receive more financial aid because I still can't afford the institution? And so that is where you would work with your financial aid advisor, who in some cases has gotten to know you through the process and understands your situation. So that's sort of the benefit of reaching out sooner than later, is this person in the financial aid office, if you end up at that school, will probably be your financial aid advisor throughout your 4 years at the institution. Okay,
Thank you so much.
Great resource. You're welcome.
Thank you.
That was such a good question that I would like to translate that in Spanish. So like, 1 second. La pregunta que nos hicieron era sobre en qué momento contactar a la oficina de ayuda financiera para recibir esta información sobre las becas o apoyos ofrecidos. Y Morgan nos indica que es totalmente posible contactar con una oficina antes de postular, después de haber leído toda la página web, y luego después que han subido todos sus documentos para ser evaluados para ayuda financiera, es importante reconectar y consultar si recibieron todos los documentos. Y por último, nos acaba de dar un super tip, que es que si alguien recibe un paquete financiero que considera que lamentablemente no es lo suficiente para poder estudiar, que uno puede contactar al oficial de Financial Aid de la universidad y solicitar una revisión. Todo eso es posible con tiempo y con comunicación. Muy buena pregunta. Next question. Yes.
Good evening. Thank you for the lecture. I would like to know how important, how relevant is the English command, the command of English, if you have a minimum of the TOEFL score maybe, and in order to apply for an undergraduate program in any major at Lehigh. Also, I would like to know if there's any special requirement in order to apply, because maybe you have an age limit, or how many years have you finished the school, maybe a college here in Peru? These are my questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So we do have, some requirements. We do require students to take the TOEFL to showcase their English language ability. We typically look for a 90 or higher on the TOEFL, but we actually don't have a minimum requirement. So it's sort of what we look for, but there's other ways that you can showcase your strengths in English. So that could be through an interview, through your scores on the evidence-based reading and writing section of the SAT, or maybe English courses that you've taken recently, and we would be looking at those grades there. Okay, so there's not a set requirement on who can apply. You do have to have a high school diploma to apply for our bachelor programs. We do. It's not very often that we have students who have a bachelor's already and then apply for another one. Oftentimes what we'll see is students who have graduated maybe from a Peruvian university, maybe applying for our graduate programs in our College of Engineering, our College of Business, Arts and Sciences, or the College of Education, which is actually specific to graduate students. So they would have different requirements as well. So they may be looking for a different TOEFL score than undergraduate admissions, but usually the website of the university you're looking at should indicate that. So if there is a minimum score, they'll tell you that, or they'll let you know if that's something that's flexible and may not be a requirement. Also at Lehigh, we have an International Center for Academic English, so preparation for you to help in transitioning to Lehigh. So there's 2 courses our undergraduate students take in the freshman year in place of the English 1 and 2 that native English speakers will take. And that course helps you to get used to taking all of your courses in English, which a lot of students who are studying in the national curriculum may not have had that experience. So it is a transition. And so at Lehigh, we help with that. And some schools may or may not offer it. So it's something to think about as you're looking at schools is what kind of programs they offer to help improve your English, especially within the first year as you're adapting to courses in all English.
Excuse me, what about age limit? Maybe is there any requirement about age limit?
There's no requirement around age limit. So basically having a high school diploma and meeting those requirements is what you would need
Thank you
to
very much.
have to apply for an undergrad.
Thank you for your question. Next question. We see, Eduardo, there's a lady in black. Okay, so we'll go to this section first, and then we'll go to that section. Please tell us your name and your question.
Yes. Good night, everyone. My name is Angelina Velasquez, and I have a specific question because it's about my case. That what if I'm a U.S. citizen because I was born in the United States, but I have studied my whole life here in Peru? No, do I have to apply for international students scholarships or for American scholarships? Thanks.
That's an excellent question. So if you have dual citizenship or any kind of US citizenship, it's a very different process. And so that's why, I wanted to emphasize when you're looking on the website to make sure you're looking at the information that applies to you. So as a US citizen, depending on the school that you're applying to, you would be eligible for federal funding in addition to maybe institutional funding. So at Lehigh, US citizens apply using an application called the FAFSA, and that is what we use to determine how much federal funding you would receive. Then you also will fill out the Css Profile. So you have two applications, very similar information will be asked of you, but it's important that you fill out both because the institutional funding that we determine through the Css Profile is what's going to help supplement what you might need to attend. And that would be in addition to the federal funding. So definitely, when you see something that says international students, you want to make sure that that you're looking at information that also applies to US citizens who may be abroad. But it does not change, you would be applying as a US citizen. So you would be looked at just as US citizens are within the United States. But since you have spent your life here in Peru, you may still be required to take the TOEFL, right? But you don't need to submit certificate of finances. So Css Profile and the FAFSA would be the main documents.
Thank you.
Just to add on to that, we in the office are starting to see a lot of students with your profile. That is that they have dual nationality. So again, you can totally count on an Education USA Center to answer more questions after the presentation. So then we had a question here in the second row.
There are also some high schools in Peru that are offering international curriculums like the IB or IGCSEs or A-levels from Cambridge. How does it apply when applying for scholarships? Do they still have to do TOEFL although they have studied in English and done their exams in English? Or?
So this is one of those answers. It's depend. The answer to a lot of questions that you might have is it depends on the institution that you're applying to. So some schools may waive the TOEFL requirement if you get a certain score on IB standard level or higher level English, or if you are in an American curriculum at your high school, or if you've scored in, A's and B's and A levels. So it varies from school to school. And it really, you need to make sure you check the website or ask, because at Lehigh, we don't necessarily have those policies in place where we're waiving it for students based on, their performance in certain curriculums. It really is on a case-by-case basis, so you have to reach out to us and let us know your situation. But I tell students who have spent their time abroad and maybe new to an international curriculum and applying to schools in the US, taking the TOEFL is always a safe BET or the IELTS in some cases for US schools, because every school is different in their requirements. So if you submit it, it can't hurt you in the process, right? It can only help to showcase your English language abilities, whether you're in IB or AP courses. So it's always good to have it just in case.
And then a second question is, do you apply first to the university and then for financial aid, or do you apply first for financial aid and then to the university, or do you do both together? How does it work?
Yeah, so you're going to want to do both together. So usually for schools that are need aware, which are many of us when we're looking at international applications because of limited budgets, we need to have all of the information in order to make that decision, because we need to be able to meet the need financially or ensure that the family can cover their finances. And that's important when you're admitted, and then also when you're going through the process of, for the visa and the I-20. So usually it's something that you're working on alongside your application to that institution.
Mhm. Thank you. And also in that row, gentleman in the black shirt.
Hi, I actually have a question for Alonso, and I was wondering if he could share with us his stats or the test scores that he took in the SAT and the TOEFL that got him into Lehigh.
Okay, this is going to be really helpful for you because my stats were actually low for the program I got admitted. Yeah, sure. I took the SAT, I got 1400, 790 in math, and 610 in the verbal section. The essay I got, I think, 14 out of, I don't remember how many coins. I got the SAT subject test 2, where I got 650. And the TOEFL, I got 94 composite, I think. Yeah. And well, I also took the EE.UU TOEFL or EE.UU exam of English that was administered in my school. I also submitted that. Regarding my GPA in Peru, it was 17.2 out of 20. And I was ranked 9 in my class out of 160.
And I just want a quick follow-up. That was very kind of you to share your statistics with everyone. But it's a very holistic process at Lehigh and a lot of other institutions. So there's not a minimum requirement, right? So we're looking at the whole picture. So not all students who apply and receive financial aid are actually going to have SAT scores that are as high as Alonso, right? And you're also going to have students that vary in the types of subject tests that they might take, or some don't take them at all. It's, again, not a requirement. So just remember that there's all sorts of ways that you can stand out in the process. At a school like Lehigh, about 85% of the students who apply are within our academic profile. They are students who will likely be successful academically based on what they bring to the table, their GPA, their test scores, and so on. But what really helps them to stand out from, the group that's also academically capable are those other characteristics that come through, and some of the things that Alonso talked about earlier that he is involved in and that he hopes to do for his country when he comes back. Those are the things that are really attractive to us, is how are students going to utilize the knowledge that they learn at the institution. So it's not as straightforward as it seems. So it's, there's not set requirements, although there's schools out there that do have them. But I just want to say, Alonso's more than just his stats, let me tell you. And it probably wouldn't have mattered what his SAT score was to be a recipient of financial aid because of the holistic process that we use.
Thank you for your question. So moving on to the gentleman right behind our former speaker.
Hi, everyone. My name is Klaus Cervantes, and I have 2 questions. The first one, it's about the expected family contribution. And maybe you mentioned, you have mentioned it, but I didn't hear if is it mandatory to present an expected family contribution or if there is a minimum amount of that quantity. And the other one, my second question is if I can apply for more than one financial ID in Lehigh University. For example, for a scholarship for the tuition, for a work study for the fees. Is that possible? Thank you.
Sure. So the work study and the financial aid are all determined based off of that CSS profile and your expected family contribution. So there's no separate application for work study. Okay, so the one application, the CSS profile, is how we determine how much financial aid you'll receive, whether you will receive loans and work study. And then the merit scholarships are something that are really based on your academic performance and personal characteristics and attributes. We do need to see the expected family contribution, both within the CSS profile and in that certificate of finances form. So that's going to help us in a lot of ways to determine what your family can afford and in determining how much need we will be able to award you in the process. Okay.
Thank you for your question. So the gentleman in the back, there's one in blue, and the following one in black.
Good evening, Morgan. I am Diego. I'm a graduate student. I would like to know, because I could not take too much attention when you say about this connection that you have with San Francisco and all this startup environment there. I would like you to try to clarify this thing for me, because I have a lot of ideas and I would like to take advantage of this opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just talk briefly about this, and I'm happy to answer the question one-on-one after the presentation as well. So our partnership with the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center in San Francisco really provides a lot of opportunities for our current students. That could include graduate students as well as our undergrads to, for instance, in the summertime for 10 weeks, we have a program called Startup Academy, where students are working full-time for various startups of different levels in Silicon Valley. They are awarded a $10,000 stipend to do this, so everything is paid for the summer. And then you also get college credit for that, and you also receive a mentor. So we do have other similar programs that are like that, that, for instance, are during the winter break. And what we're hoping to do is more of a year-round program where you'll be able to take courses for the semester, maybe while doing an internship with one of the larger companies or with a small startup while you're out there. So that's just sort of a brief overview, but I'd be happy to talk more in detail about it later.
One question more. How can I get more information, more detailed information about that? Should I write an email to your university?
Yeah, so anyone who wants more information after today, you're welcome to reach out to me directly or anybody that you find online that's associated with the program of interest, or if it's the Lehigh at NASDAQ Center, you're going to want to search that, and you'll probably end up finding my colleague Samantha DeWalt's information, who directs that program. And I do have some business cards here that you're more than welcome to take. But if you're listening online, my email address is M as in Mary, B as in boy, V as in Victor, the number 2 at lehigh.edu. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful for everyone, and I will direct your questions if I can't answer them. But we have a website on the Lehigh at NASDAQ Center that you can find out more.
Hi, my name is Piero Rivera. First of all, I would like to thank you both for the information. And then I noticed that there wasn't a lot of information about graduate students, so I would like to know the approximate cost for a master's in Lehigh University. How much it would be, and the scholarships that are available for graduate students or master.
Yeah. So I think Kelly is more knowledgeable on the opportunities for graduate studies than I am when it comes to financial aid and scholarships. Of course, for graduate study, the the cost is going to depend on the number of credits that the program requires, because oftentimes you're paying by the credit. And then also you may be living off campus as a graduate student. So that will change the cost depending what city you live in and the cost of living there. And at Lehigh, the cost does vary based on the graduate program that you're pursuing and the cost per credit there. But you can almost always find that information pretty easily online, along with opportunities to find funding, whether it's a research assistantship or a teaching assistantship. But I think Kelly can probably share more information about those opportunities.
Sure. So it's actually very useful that Morgan went first, because a lot of the things that she mentioned about undergraduate financial aid and being a competitive candidate also apply to the graduate competition for financial aid. What we can offer you is an advising session specifically about graduate financial aid, but just so you have an idea, most of our students who are successful have a very strong CV, which means that they were really strong in university here in Peru, good grades, but they also have experience, for example, a minimum of 2 years of working in what they studied and achieving a lot of success in their positions. A lot of the candidates that I've worked with have also, like Alonso mentioned, helped out the community. So they didn't just stay in school with good grades, but they went to work and then they went to work for their community. So there's this term that today we learned through Morgan that was holistic. This is a concept that's so important for, I think, everybody here to grasp, which is the fact that I am not just my grades, like no soy solo una reflexión de mis notas. I'm a reflection of everything I do. And I think that a lot of the times when students apply to American universities, they kind of don't understand those spaces that say, can you talk to us about your leadership? Can you talk to us about your community service involvement? Can you talk to us about your hobbies? Like in the Peruvian system, we don't talk about our hobbies to go to uni. But in the US system, if you want to compete for scholarships, you need to be an interesting student. And so I think that's why it was so great when Morgan mentioned, we have a student here with great statistics, but he's also a very interesting, fulfilled young man, which made him attractive to several institutions. So I'm also going to put my cards on the table to set up a one-on-one asesoría about postgrado with you.
Okay, thank you. One more question, just the last one. What if I already made undergraduate exchange program? Is there any preference for people who haven't made a program that are applying to Lehigh University over people who have? Like if I already made an exchange program and I would like to go to a graduate program now. So is there any?
Okay, well, let's expand it and not just talking about Lehigh University. I have a lot of students who ask if they've been to the United States for another program, if that kind of disqualifies them from competing for scholarships to go back. And I can tell you from my experience, that's not the case. Most of the students that I have doing masters and PhDs actually were selected because they had the fortune of doing a short-term exchange or research. So that's actually going to add value to your application.
Okay, thank you.
Great. One more question from that side, and then we'll finish with this side. No more questions? Then we have in the front row, and then 2 in the back. And then we will wrap up.
Okay, thank you for your answer. I have 2 questions. The first is about the financial aid. What happens if the parents are retired? So they have a monthly amount, but it's low. But they have saved in the bank for this kind of studies in the USA. When I apply fill the form, you show us like a 4 columns. It's meant like a schedule for years. What can I put this information there? Because I have an amount in the bank, but it's for all years, not for only for one. Obviously, maybe also we have insurance, university insurance with an insurance company, but it's also low, the amount that we receive each year for help with these expenses to study in the USA. It's for my daughter, Andrea. First question. Second question is about when you mentioned about the scholarships, you mentioned that you evaluate good leadership, theater, and music abilities. How we can demonstrate leadership, abilities in music, etc. We need some documents. How we can show that? Thank
Right.
you.
Yeah, thank you for your questions. And I think your first question is on the minds of a lot of parents out there that have to fill out these forms. Every situation is different. The CSS profile is pretty comprehensive, so you'll be able to indicate, how much you do receive, even if it's a limited amount. You would indicate how much is in your savings. A school would not require you to pour out your savings in the first year, but may require you to spend a portion of that, right? And so it's really also a family decision in determining how much the family can afford. And so that's where that certificate of finances comes in. So that's where you really have to evaluate your situation and think about what you need for the coming years, knowing that you may not have a paycheck from a full-time job coming in, right? And so what is the contribution that you can make for those 4 years? And you really have to predict it. And we're also predicting from our end what we think that number is based on the information that you share. But if there's any information that is not captured within the CSS profile that you think would be important for the financial aid advisor to know, share that in an email with them, okay? Because that can be added to the application when they're doing the actual evaluation. And then to your second question about scholarships that might be specific to music abilities or other talents like within theater or community service, some of those may have a specific application where you would answer some questions or maybe provide some documentation. It's really different depending on the scholarship. We don't necessarily require students to send in like an audition or anything like that. A lot of it has to do with them telling us what they've been involved in and how they've contributed and how they hope to continue doing that at Lehigh. But again, every school is different. So some schools may require like an art portfolio from the student if they're applying for maybe like an art scholarship or even a very specific art program at that university. So just want to make sure that the Common App really includes all of those different pieces that you're involved in, whether that's through your high school or even in your spare time. Like Kelly mentioned, your hobbies, right? So if one of your hobbies is reading, you spend a lot of time reading, include that in your extracurricular activities. We want to know how you spend your time outside of the classroom. And so that could be also maybe caring for a family member or for your siblings. Those are things that we actually want to know because that is time, that may take away from what you can do in the classroom or the activities that you can participate at your high school. So this helps us to really see the whole picture. And again, it's going to be one of those things that depends from school to school. But there's lots of ways that you can demonstrate those qualities through the application.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your question. And we'll wrap up with a question from gentleman in the white shirt and the lady in the red, in another white shirt.
Okay, good evening. I have a question regarding transfer students. For example, someone has been studying 2 years in an university here, and they decide to apply to Lehigh or another university in the US, and they wanna. My question is, can they like apply as transfer student, although they are international, and can some of the courses they have taken here can be like convalidated? Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, so every school is different with their transfer policies, right? But at Lehigh, we do admit a certain number of transfer students every year, and every year there are international students included in that transfer population. So in the application process, you are submitting, your transcripts from your first 2 years in college in this case, as well as other information, just similar to those applying as a first-year student. However, one of the big differences is at Lehigh, we don't have financial aid and scholarships for international transfer students. So that should be one of the first things. If that's something that you need to be able to attend, look to make sure that they offer it for transfer students before you continue in the process of applying, right? So always a good question to ask. If you don't see it on the website, follow up with someone with an email to make sure that you know whether or not they offer it and how much they offer in terms of financial aid, because sometimes it can be more limited for transfer students.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And just to motivate you a little bit more, since we have about 4,600 universities, if some do have a policy that they don't award financial aid, others do. So definitely don't let that kind of deter you. And for the final question of the night.
Hi, my name is Risa. I'm in my junior year in high school, and I'm just searching for universities, and I wanted to know, how do I reach to Education USA's advisors here in IPNA?
Well, that's the best question to end the night, I think. Please, Alonso, put that slide of our contact information. So we are here on the 3rd floor of the EEUU Oficina Central. I brought my business cards, so I'll put them on the table. And also, I think most of you have a little green folleto with our datos de contacto. So the best thing would be like for you to send an email saying asunto. I would like to request an asesoría. And then you begin by saying, Kelly, I went to this amazing Education USA event on Wednesday, and I would like to set up an advising session with you. When can you receive me? And we can begin. And I can tell you that the relationships that we have with our students are long-term relationships. So it's probably going to be many asesorías. For example, Alonso, could you give us just an estimate of how many asesorías you had to do to finish your process?
Like 15.
Over the course of about, a year. So the cost, there is a cost for our advising. That's 30 soles. 30 soles gets you 1 hour, one-to-one with an advisor. So please send us an email and we'll be very happy to respond to you at least in that week. Okay.
Thank you.
Because of time, we're going to conclude the live open questions, but some of us will still be here to answer the final questions, as well as remind you that you have our contact information. If you found out about our event on Facebook or on any of the social media, we're going to put there the emails that you can follow up with if you have more pressing information. But I did want to conclude tonight with one question, or really a reflection, which I'm going to ask Alonso to make in Spanish. Alonso, cuando conversamos contigo en el centro y te hablamos de este proceso, que es un proceso largo y complicado, en tu caso, tú tuviste la experiencia de primera mano que sí es complicado. Y si nos puedes hablar un poco de tu primer intento a la postulación y por qué tuviste que volver a postular.
Bueno, como le había comentado, el tema es que yo me enteré muy tarde de cómo se postulaba a los Estados Unidos y también que era posible. Estamos hablando de más o menos octubre, noviembre. Aquí los SATs y los exámenes se dan aproximadamente en diciembre, por ahí. Y en diciembre, octubre, y ahora creo que en marzo y mayo. Y bueno, entonces no tuve tiempo de prepararme muy bien. Conseguí un puntaje que, si bien es cierto, era bueno, no era lo suficiente para entrar a las universidades top de Estados Unidos. Entonces decidí mejor tomarme un año sabático y hice un montón de actividades. Me esforcé todavía más para los exámenes, para el SAT, el TOEFL. Y bueno, con mucho esfuerzo se logró, ¿no?
Exacto. So, para concluir, nosotros tenemos en el centro muchas historias de éxito y muchas de ellas se asemejan a la historia de Alonso. Lo intentaron la primera vez, aprendieron y tuvieron que volver a dar el examen, volver a postular hasta que al final lograron lo que quisieron y van a viajar este año. Entonces, les doy a todos ustedes muchísimas gracias y pido un otro round of applause para Morgan y Alonso. Bueno, con eso terminamos la transmisión. Toda esta presentación está en el canal de YouTube para que lo vean posteriormente. Muchas gracias.